We talked about on stream yesterday, sadly the VOD doesn't exist, so there's no YouTube video about it, how there was a massive Ukrainian breakthrough around Bakhmut. Now when I say massive, I mean massive relative to the Bakhmut fighting, relative to the last 6 months of fighting around that area. They liberated around 6 kilometers of territory, overran a bunch of Russian positions. There's a ton of footage online of the Ukrainian tanks just rolling over Russians in trenches, Russians literally dropping their guns and running away, both Wagner and professional military soldiers running away, with casualties ranging in the 400 to 500 range, with 400 killed, 200 killed, 200 wounded, and an unknown amount captured. I saw a bunch of different videos of captured Russian soldiers when the positions were overran that they surrendered. And this liberated about 3 square kilometers of territory below Bakhmut and the fields around it. And it has led Wagner to start panicking about a possible encirclement, saying that this most likely would not be the end, that there would be more counteroffensives in the near future. There was a lot of fear as to why the Russian front line collapsed so easily if they didn't station enough troops in the area. They started asking questions about the quality of the equipment, about the quality of troops. And a larger issue that I brought up at the time is how poor the communication is between groups like Wagner, other private military countries, the LPR soldiers, that's the Luhansk People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, the official Russian military, all the different groups that are fighting in this area. The communication between the groups is terrible. And I'm not even the one to say this. This is coming from pro-Russian military Telegram accounts that talk about volunteers that are supporting them, how all these groups hate each other. They all think they're the hero. They're the ones doing the real fighting, and everybody else isn't. Wagner thinks they're doing the fighting. Kadyrov thinks his boys are doing the fighting, and they're all kind of doing a lot of infighting against each other. That's part of the reason why we see so much footage of Yevgeny Prigozhin condemning the Russian military, so he can try to get more supplies out of them through public outrage. And that's just part of this infighting, and that is one of the reasons I think they were able to have their positions overrun. But you know, a lot of this is speculation, and we're continuing to speculate as more reports are coming out today that on top of all that territory that was liberated, and 3 kilometers, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider the fact that in the last 6 months of fighting, the Russians have captured 4 kilometers in the city of Bakhmut, you start to get an idea of, oh, actually, that is a significant amount of territory. Obviously, there's a difference between the condensed urban center of Bakhmut and the field surrounding it. I think we actually have a map so you can get an idea of what exactly was liberated. It's this area down here that was liberated. It doesn't show the full area. All of this right here was liberated. Not only this blue area, but this kind of slightly decolored area was also liberated. We're seeing other reports of areas here getting liberated, there getting liberated. These are the reports that are coming in right now. Here, of course, is Bakhmut, the city, the last 10% that is still being fought over. Now we're getting reports all around this area of breakthroughs. Let's actually read from a Russian military Telegram account reporting of Ukrainian success. This says in Soledad, but it's not Soledad. That's not a thing. It's Soledar. I think they just misspelled it. The Kiev regime began the implementation of an operation to encircle our forces in the Bakhmut direction. The head of PMC Wagner has repeatedly spoken about these plans. I already wrote that the enemy is planning to strike at the flanks to reach the rear of our forces, which are located in pronunciation time, Artemovich and the surrounding area. Today, Simonov announced the breakthrough of the armed forces of Ukraine in that direction. Our troops retreated from their positions. Another strike in Klininishka area, and also with local success. Dude, I can barely pronounce English words without stuttering, so I'm doing my best. And that is not all. In the Soledar area, yeah, it's not supposed to be Soledad. In the Soledar area, the enemy was able to organize a breakthrough with several units. For those of you who don't know where Soledar is, I don't think a lot of this is showing up on the map yet. We do have a map from the pro-Russian side of some of the areas that have been liberated. Again, the situation is constantly updating. It's a very fluid situation, but Soledar is up here. So Soledar was captured about 5 or 6 months ago. It was very brutal, the fighting to capture Soledar. The Russians captured it because, one, they wanted to encircle Bakhmut, and two, they wanted access to the salt mines in Soledar, which you can use to store a lot of military equipment that would then be kind of invulnerable to missile strikes, air strikes, artillery strikes that have been launched at a lot of ammunition depots. They can maybe use it to store vehicles. And so it is honestly probably somewhat more important in some ways than Bakhmut itself, removing, of course, the symbolic significance and the stepping stone aspect, the fact that they need to capture Bakhmut in order to keep going on to locations like Chasiv Yar, and eventually the big thing, Kramatorsk and Slovansk, which is kind of hard to imagine them doing anytime soon, since Kupiansk was retaken, and it's going to be hard for them to encircle it, and it's much more built up from Bakhmut, and it's also larger than Bakhmut, and it's taken them 10 months to capture Bakhmut, and now there's counteroffensives, meaning that maybe they won't even capture Bakhmut at all. Anyway, let's continue. And that is not all. In the Soledar area, the enemy was able to organize a breakthrough with several units, supported by armored groups, each of which had 2 to 3 tanks. Now the militants of the armed forces of Ukraine are trying to gain a foothold in their positions. The situation is difficult. Very, very bad. Can we get some prayers in chat for the Russian military? Can we get some guys praying for them? They seem to be having a hard night. Can we have somebody, maybe have them on watch, just make sure they don't do anything to themselves? I care a lot about mental health. In the next 24 hours, apparently, the Kiev regime will begin to increase its efforts in the south. I don't know where they got this information, whether they got it from Russian intelligence or what else, or if they're just like making this logical conclusion that they're making breakthroughs here, so they're going to make more breakthroughs later. But in the next 24 hours, apparently, the Kiev regime will begin to increase its efforts in the south. In the Orekov area, in order to tie up our troops with battles, and in the, they're screwing with me. In the Holopoli area, in order to break through the first line of defense, we will assume that the enemy counteroffensive has begun. Ooh, the enemy counteroffensive has begun. I don't know if this is the counteroffensive. It's way too early to say this is the counteroffensive. This could just be a small localized counteroffensive. I know that the Wagner Group has been saying for a while that the big Ukrainian spring counteroffensive that's been talked about, which Zelensky is now hinting that he might delay some more so he can prepare it with more troops, with more armored equipment, with more artillery. Whether that's PSYOP or not, who knows? But Wagner says that that's going to happen in the Bakhmut area. That's going to be here, even though most reporters and most analysts seem to believe it's going to be down in Zaporozhye, which I'm not a military expert. Take this with a grain of salt. But to me, it makes the most sense as well. It's one of the least fortified areas that they would be attacking in the Donbass. It's going to be a lot more fortified. It also would allow them to cut the Russian front in two, and would be a lot easier for them to liberate areas like Metsiopol and push the Russians not only out of most of the Zaporozhye Oblast, but also the entirety of the Kherson Oblast, push them into Crimea. It makes the most sense from what I've heard from the military experts that I respect, not only here on the ground, but also online from the commentators who have experience from other wars and have been studying this war for years. There are other areas that they could do as well. It is possible that they try to do a counteroffensive in the Bakhmut area and encircle Russian troops. It could be possible that they launch some more attacks from the Kupiansk direction and the Donetsk Oblast. I know Peer Run did a video where they talked about all the different areas where they could be launching this counteroffensive, but most people seem to think that it's going to be in Zaporozhye, that they're either going to launch an attack from this direction in Zaporozhye, or they're going to attack from across the river, which I think is a lot less likely because it would be a lot more difficult and come with like 10 times more risk. But there have been some reports and some rumors about it, whether it's PSYOPs, whether it isn't PSYOPs, who knows? Anyway, I wanted to also show the Wagner map of exactly what has been captured in the last 48 hours. You can see down here, this March 10th area. This is the counteroffensive we were talking about earlier. This is the location. Sorry, it's such a big map. Gotta scroll around. This location, the 3 kilometers that were taken on March 10th. And above it, you can see new areas that they're marking as recaptured areas to the north of the road of life. For those of you who don't know what the road of life is, it's this one road that has been used heavily by the Ukrainians to support Bakhmut with supplies, that has been heavily targeted by Russian shelling. There's been some footage that's come out, released online. I don't know if anybody could link it in chat, I would appreciate it, of just Bakhmut in the distance smoking, the road of life just covered in like Ukrainian destroyed vehicles as they continue to try to get supplies into the city. But the Russians wanted to take it and encircle it in order to cut off the Ukrainian soldiers in Bakhmut and, capture them and, make them all surrender. And this was something that motivated American intelligence organizations and the American government to encourage the Ukrainians to pull out of Bakhmut, because they not only thought it would be too much of a cost to defend it, but they also thought that there was a real risk of the Ukrainians getting encircled. Now, that never came to fruition. I mean, it's still possible that it could come to fruition, but now you're seeing the areas around it being liberated, both to the north and to the south, as well as that area from March 10th. And this is from pro-Russian sources. This isn't a pro-Ukrainian source. This is not from, the fantastic guys in Kiev. This is from a source that would be more critical. Now, more critical of Ukrainian claims of liberation of territory. Now, the Russians have released an official statement about what's going on. Here it is. The situation in the special military operation zone is under control. Russian Defense Ministry. So I guess, it's all just a lie. I guess it's all just a lie. It's all a big fib. The Russians said it was a fib. It's all a lie. Now, I made a tweet about this when they released the statement. I didn't necessarily believe all these new claims of liberation. I'm a pessimist. While I, of course, want to see all of Ukraine liberated, I try to be as pessimistic as possible so my hopes don't get dashed. This is something I learned from my Lebanese Ukrainian friend who, again, being Lebanese Ukrainian, fleeing Lebanon for war, going to Ukraine to flee war, you kind of will probably develop a pessimistic mentality, be kind of cynical. It allows me to, kind of keep my emotions in check. But after they released this statement, this made me believe like 99% of the claims of liberated territory around Bakhmut. Because the Russians only release statements like this when things are not going well or the situation is getting out of control. They released this during the counteroffensive in Kherson. They released statements like this during the counteroffensive near Kiev, but they most notoriously released this statement during the counteroffensive around Kharkiv, when the Russian front line was so thin because they had been redeploying troops into the Donbass to try to take more territory. So the Ukrainians launched a counteroffensive and pushed the Russians basically out of the entirety of the Kharkiv Oblast. If you look up here on this map, you see all this green territory, that like very large section of territory, Kupiansk and all these other locations. This came from the Kharkiv counteroffensive and came from the Russians having too thin of a front line, stretching themselves too thin, and the Ukrainians punching through it. The Ukrainians actually probably could have taken even more territory if they were more prepared. They were actually shocked by their own success, and they did their best to, gain upon their success and utilize their success. But they could have probably got even more success if they had more troops in the area, but they didn't think the Russian front line was going to be as thin as it ended up being. I actually almost went to Kupiansk a week ago. I was going to go there to film with artillery crews. I didn't put any notes online about it because, as you can see, Kupiansk is pretty close to the front line. But the day before I went, we got reports of this area the area I was going to go to with artillery crews getting heavily shelled. And the day of, a few of the artillery crew members I was going to go film with actually, died from shelling. And so it was ruled, I still wanted to go, but it was ruled that it was too dangerous for me to go. And the people who were going to transport me there said that they could not transport me there in good conscience. So maybe hopefully in the future, but for now, I still haven't visited there. Also, I don't know if you ever checked this map. This is my favorite map. This is my new favorite map system. This is Deep State. This is the map I use. Look at a little Easter egg that I found today. I didn't notice this until today. If you click the capital Kiev, you get a little Bayraktar drone and it flies around. I didn't know that. And hey, look what you can do. You can go and you can click another location. Oh, boom. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? Oh, you know what? The Belarusians have gotten away with too much. Isn't that fun? That's so fun. Oh, Belgorod. Okay. I have reduced myself to the mentality of a child. Anyway, we're still waiting for more information to come out about this breakthrough. It's a very flexible situation, very fluid situation. Do not be surprised if in the very short, immediate future, after how I'm talking about this now, we're going to get more reports of liberated territory, more reports of the Russians, the front line being broken through, or even a few reports of some of this being exaggerated. The situation is extremely flexible. We're not getting a lot of statement from the Ukrainian government because the Ukrainian government is trying to be hush hush. They're trying to protect OPSEC. Russian military blogs are panicking and the government's saying there's nothing to worry about, the Russian government, which, I mean, that's the Russian government, so I don't really buy it. But we should probably wait for more information to come out. The situation is very fluid. Hopefully we'll see more stuff get liberated. Even if this isn't the counteroffensive I was expecting, and this almost certainly isn't the big counteroffensive everyone's been expecting, even if the Russians are saying it is, I'm anxious to see what happens. I'm anxious. And man, you can kind of see it. Is that a bottleneck forming? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. My goodness, this is a really good map.